like that little kid saying, I thought life was about understanding things, not learning things. And there's a big difference between learning and understanding. I noticed a lot of the people around me just learned, and others, many of them just didn't understand. But you don't get graded on your understanding. You get graded on your learning.
Hello, everyone. We are Sonia and Nick, and this is Dyslexia Journey. And today we are excited to welcome Darius Namdaran. Darius is the host of the Dyslexia Explored podcast, and as well as the CEO of Ivy. So we are excited to talk to Darius today. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So we have a lot to cover with you today because you are yourself one of our dyslexic voices, and you also have adult children who are dyslexic. So we'll get into that as well. But let's just start at the very beginning. So what was it like before you were identified with dyslexia as a child? I don't know what age that was.
Well, I actually found out about dyslexia when I was 35. Okay, so the second time I went to university, I thought to myself, right, I know I used to write apologies at the end of my exam essays. You know, when I was a teenager, I would write an apology literally at the end. I would say, Dear examiner, I am so sorry about my handwriting. I am so sorry about my spelling. I really do try. I hope you can see through it and appreciate the content that's there and understand I have done my best to do this well. Because I was given that advice by another examiner who said, you got to realize the examiner is at the end of the paper looking at it going, what just happened there? And if you put a message at the bottom, they can read that message. You can connect with them. And so that's what I did for every single exam. And I did quite well. I was one of the highest percentile in Scottish exams and ended up going to law school. But just because I gamed the system, I figured out how to game the system. I didn't actually figure out how to learn. So that's when I actually found out I had dyslexia, and I discounted it because letters don't jump up and down for me. When I read something, everything is static; it's not moving around, and I just assumed I can't be dyslexic because letters don't jump up and down for me. And I just got this misconception that everyone with dyslexia, their letters jump up and down. And that's totally not true. It's actually, now I realize it's only about 3% of those with dyslexia have bouncing letters. Everyone else, they're fixed. And it's not about letters jumping. It's about how you process the information. So it all began, I suppose, when I was at school. I was 5, 6 years old. I was actually in Iran. My parents were brought into the school and the teacher said, I think your child is retarded. And it's not a word we use nowadays anymore, but I think that was the official politically correct term at the time, believe it or not. Can you imagine that retard is a politically correct term? Well, that's how they viewed me. And I wasn't getting it, my parents were confused. Then my mum and dad, I can't remember any of this because I just blanked it all out, But what I do remember, one day when we were in the revolution and the tanks were rolling down the streets and we were getting ready to come back home to the UK because I was born in the UK, my mum was from the UK. I overheard the teacher said to me, Darius, you're going to find it really hard in the UK schools because they're really good schools and you're not clever enough for those schools. And the biggest irony is now, when I'm 35, I probably got a higher IQ than any teacher who's ever taught me. Do you know what I mean? And that includes university. And like when you get the dyslexia assessment and there's like a IQ, it's just like I had to break out a new pack of cards that I've never used before because you just kept going through them. And isn't it fascinating that, you can actually be a deeply intelligent person and just not be able to get it the way that the people around about you get it? So I came to school. My mum said to me when I was about 9 years old, I was going to a local primary school. And my mum said to me, Darius, how are you doing at school? How are you finding it? And now I know it was a loaded question. But I was just like, oh yeah, it's a bit easy, it's just too easy. And then she says to me, oh, because I've spoken to the school and they say that you're finding it really hard. And I'm like, I don't understand, you know? And then they say, you find it hard to remember these words, you're finding it hard to do your spelling, you're finding it hard to do this, and you're finding it hard to do that. And I'm like, oh, yeah? So? Because I thought school was for learning. I thought school was for understanding things. And so when I understood how a building was built, I was like, or how farming worked or whatever, I was like, yeah, I got it. This is great. Yeah, got it. I've learned that. But the teacher's understanding of learning was, can you spell agriculture correctly 10 times in a row? I'm like, is that relevant? And so there was this kind of, I realized at that moment that, gosh, I wasn't viewing school the same way as my teachers were. I wasn't that self-aware, but it was a bit of a jar. I remember that moment really clearly. You're struggling. So my mum took me out of school and put me in jail, boarding school, and it was horrible. It was like being in jail. We called it Caldits. All the children called it Caldits. Caldits is a very famous prison movie, and I broke out in eczema because I was so stressed. And, then all my challenges and problems were attributed to my eczema because I would just sit in the corner with cracked hands and arms and be withdrawn and moody and not perform well in sports or anything like that. I was bullied, picked upon, things like that. It was just, but they thought, my mum and dad said to me, just pull your socks up, more. Very public school, very British. Pull your socks up, try harder, And I tried. I really did. And there really wasn't very much mercy at school, or understanding at the school. And my only breath of fresh air was my maths teacher, who was called Mr. Rowland. And Mr. Rowland, he taught the older boys, but we would all do homework. I mean, you're in a boarding school, so you do homework in the school. So you go to another class at 6 o'clock after dinner. You have to do homework till 7 o'clock, 7:30. Then you got half an hour to play table tennis, and then you got to go to bed, and then get punched through the night by the other boys in the dorm. But what Mr. Rowland did was he would stop at my maths in the UK. That's the proper way of saying it. Um, math is so much better, actually. It's just more efficient. So he would stop at my work, look at it, and one day, and I was scared because this is a big teacher, big boy teacher, and he was paying attention to me. And if someone pays attention to you, it's normally because something's going wrong. And you don't want to be a center of attention. You don't want to catch anyone's attention, especially if you've got dyslexia. You're like, just hide. He looked at my work, lifted up the book, went through it, and he said, you know what? I'm looking forward to you being in my class. I was like, wow. And he said, I think you're going to be good at maths. I was like, oh, I wasn't good at anything, but he believed in me. And he said, do you know why I think you're going to be good at maths, Namdaran? I said, no, sir. And he said, because you're lazy. I was like, oh, okay. And he said, well, lazy people make the best mathematicians because they're always trying to find the quickest way to the answer. And that's exactly what I was doing with all my maths. I wasn't following the rules of the maths. I was trying to figure out what is another workaround, another way to the answer? And he could see that I was mathematically thinking at an advanced level. I was puzzling this out and basically creating math solutions on the fly. I didn't realize it, I was just getting the solution and moving on. So that was kind of my early years.
And did anyone, I mean, you may not remember this, but, talking to your parents later, did anyone ever even mention the idea of dyslexia to
No,
you or to them?
no, no, it wasn't on the radar. I just tried as hard as possible, in classes, with brute force effort to get by.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you look back now and see any particular thing as a compensation? It sounds like the thing you're talking about with math, that's more just, different ways of approaching problems, with your own, brain. But I'm wondering, do you look back now and see anything as a compensation?
Well, I look back and I think I saw maths and chess as a compensation because everybody needs to feel like they're good at something, And so it was like, yeah, I'm rubbish at all of that, but I'm really good at maths and I'm really good at chess. Play me at chess, I can beat you. Play me, do maths with me, I can beat you. And so I always had that kind of stronghold to disappear into and say, well, at least I'm good at maths. Um, and so there was that going on inside. At least I'm good at something.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
there was an interesting incident. So I think it's really important that everyone feels that they're really good at something, whatever it is, because it becomes like a lifeline or something to grip onto. And I remember I was terrible at sports. Absolutely hated it. Like if I would open up my arm, my skin would all rip. And any kind of movement, there was a cost to it. It was hugely effortful. And so going for a long distance run or playing rugby or cricket or whatever was costly for me in terms of pain. And so I would withdraw from it and I would be not very good because I wouldn't do it very much. Until one day I'm standing outside and the big boys turn to this bunch of little boys saying, we're going to go and play rugby for lunch. Do you want to come with us? Because they needed some cannon fodder. They didn't have enough numbers. And I was included because I was roughly near these other boys. I was this loner and left alone and ignored. And they looked at me and said, so are you coming? And I'm this tiny little kid. Yeah, all right, great. I'm included. Fantastic. So we went to this field. Everyone got chosen. The big boys would choose and I would be last. All right, Namdaran, come over here. And I get put in the back of the field, okay? Now, rugby is a blood sport. It's not like you Americans where you've got padding and all of that jazz. You can have full contact and no padding. You break stuff when you actually play rugby in the UK. So what happened was I was standing there at the bottom of the field. All the kids were in front. One big boy gets the ball and runs straight down, okay? And he decides he's not going to run past me because he's got the whole football pitch. He's got everything. It's just a straight run to the line. He decided he would run through me. Okay. And so I'm standing there going, what do I do? Because I've got to pretend that I even tried. I've got to pretend because that's what you're doing with dyslexia most of the time. You're just pretending until hopefully something works. And you're going through the motions, pretending. And this guy's running at me, knees pumping up and down like pistons. And I know they're going to hit me. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And all of a sudden, this flash comes into my mind of me at a dinner table. And someone says, the right way to tackle someone is to grab them around the waist and then slide down and not worry about their legs. And I was like, something inside of me was like, I'm going to do this. And I went straight for the guy, grabbed him around the waist. He dragged me for about 10 yards and I was sliding down gradually while he's pumping away. And then bang, he hits the ground like a giant and the ground shook and the ball bounced away. And we're on the ground. Everyone's looking, going, what just happened? Like he's 13 years old and I'm 7 or 8. And after that moment of shock, everyone kind of runs for the ball and him and I get up and I thought he was going to hit me. like he was going to be angry. But he put out his hands and he was like, "Well done, Namdaran. I'm picking you first next time." And from then on, I got picked first every single time because they said, "He's a good tackler." And I think that's something to do with dyslexia because strategically, I'd figured out the fundamental principle of tackling any person in any situation because I understood the fundamental principles. I wasn't just going through, oh, this is how you should do it in this angle. I understood the principles and I could tackle anyone. And I basically became a quarterback equivalent, scrum half, because I found one place I was good at something finally.
Wow, that's a really, really good analogy. That's really interesting. And really brings to light, I think, what we often talk about, which is that there, it is this whole different way of thinking. It's not just about reading and writing. Dyslexia is also just about a different way of approaching information and processing it and all of that. And so that's a really good example of that. I think, like you said, the fundamental principles. So does that was that true in general? Would you say, like growing up, but also now as an adult, that you learn best and interact with information best if you can can connect with those fundamental principles?
Absolutely. I think that's my major hack for dyslexia. It's like, so there's kind of three layers of knowledge. There's fundamental principles, there's processes, and then there's facts. The way I look at it, you can chop it up different ways, but let's just simplify. There's the external facts, there's the underlying processes, and then there's principles. Okay. And so someone could talk you through the processes of tackling someone. But then if they, like they did at this dinner table, one of the bigger teachers was talking about the principles, and my mind connected to that, this principle of capture someone around the waist, which is unmoving and predictable and in one place. And you just concentrate on that and then just slide until you trap them. Um, and I could understand, the mechanics of that, the physics of that, and the universality of that. Um, because I could never remember processes or facts. I just don't remember them. I'm not actually that interested in process and facts. I'm more interested in, like that little kid saying, I thought life was about understanding things, not learning things. And there's a big difference between learning and understanding. I noticed a lot of the people around me just learned, and others, many of them just didn't understand. But you don't get graded on your understanding. You get graded on your learning.
Right, right.
And so, the next big story for me was when I was about 14 years old. I was really failing badly at school. I was at the bottom of every set. What they did was my mom and dad spent a fortune on me on private education, constantly going, Darius, could you do a bit better? We're spending so much money. And I felt so guilty because they were really trying and I was trying to live up to their expectations, etc. It was a fifth set, bottom of the geography tip. My geography teacher pulls me up and I'm like, oh no, I'm in trouble again. And then he goes, and I was thinking in that lesson, I'm with all the bad boys. How am I always with the bad boys? And then, like, I'm in the cabin, the porta cabin outside with the lovely special teacher, but I'm with all the bad boys and the ones that act a bit strange. And I'm kind of like, what's going on here? I don't understand this. Anyway, I just felt a fish out of water even when I was put in the cabin. So he brought me up. All the pupils went out, and I was expecting to be, told off, maybe even given the belt or a cane or something like that, because that was happening in school regularly then too. It wasn't as bad as that, but it was like, oh, I'm in trouble. And he said, no, Namdaran, I think you're smart, and I don't understand why you're in this set. I said, well, I am trying, sir. And he said, I ask you these questions in geography, and then, your answers don't kind of match what you say in the class. And I'm like, well, I try and answer the question. And he was like, let me just teach you some rules. And this is the principles, okay? So let me teach you some rules of how school works. This is how it works in my class. If you tell me in the lesson, in the test exactly what I said the week before, I'll give you a C. If you tell me more of what I said before, I'll give you a B. If you tell me what I said before and connect it to something else I said to do with that topic, I'll give you an A. And I'm like, so I just tell you what you told me? And he's like, yeah, that's how it works. Like, really? I tell you what you told me? I thought I meant to understand it, say in my own way, bring my own ideas in, create some new solutions and stuff like that. Like in physics, I'm really struggling about what the substance of gravity is. And he's like, hold on a minute. Nobody knows what the substance of gravity is, and they don't even start asking that question until you're in university. Just slow down a little bit and just tell me what I told you. Would you do that for me, please? Like, well, okay, if I get a B for that, I'll do it. Now I'm getting D's and E's. I'm off down the bottom. Failure. And then he said, while you're at it, get this book called Use Your Head by Tony Buzan, which teaches you how to learn and teaches you all the techniques for studying. So I go home, speak to my mom. I said, Mom, geography teacher said I've got to get this book called Use Your Head by Tony Buzan. And then my mom says, I've been trying to get you to read that book for 3 months. No, you haven't. No, you haven't, Mom. No, 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 no. Yes, I have. There it is on the shelf, sitting there, waiting for you. Oh, really? I'm like, well, obviously you didn't say it in the right way, because my geography teacher did say it in the right way. So I learned the rules. 1 year later, I'm at the top of all the classes.
Yeah.
Because all I did was tell them what they said to me. 2 years later, I got into law school. The only reason I passed exams then was someone explained to me, look, when they do exams, they teach you 100% of a subject, but they can't test you on 100%. So they test you on about 20% of the subject, right? So, because they've only got so much time. So if you can predict what 20% they're going to ask you on, then you don't need to do the other 80%, do you? I'm like, brilliant. Okay, let's do that. So I would do a statistical analysis of all the past papers. I would go, right, they asked about this, they asked about that. I do a little, calculation on the back of a bit of paper. I go, I don't think they'll be asking this. They asked this 3 times already. They probably won't ask that again because they'll, be scrolling it. And I'd narrow it down to about 40% of the subject. And I'd basically gamble on it and study on that. And, I threw the dice and I got my grade. So I didn't actually understand the subjects very well. But that stopped working in law school big time in the third year of Edinburgh Law School. That they knew how to stop that.
Interesting. I think what's so interesting about that is that, maybe for our longing for learning to actually be understanding and focused on that, sometimes we maybe don't enough teach those gaming the system skills, but I mean, sometimes that can be okay to add in even now. I mean, of course we prefer to have the understanding there, but I'm just thinking of like, with our dyslexic kids, like, and really with anybody, right? Because that is how the system works. I think that is okay to sort of like help people understand those fundamental principles of how the system works.
I mean, sometimes it's necessary, right? Like we are in this world with systems, and I guess to get through, I guess that's what you discovered. It's like to get through the system, to do what you wanted to do, you had to understand the fundamentals of the system in order to get through it. Right.
Well, it's kind of like, when I used to teach dyslexic teenagers how to get through college, school with mind mapping. I used to do that about 3-4 years ago. That's where it all began. The biggest challenge with dyslexia is often figuring out what question the person's actually asking. It's
Right.
like it's called a comprehension of the question. It's like what are you actually asking? Because if you're a very big picture thinker, like if someone gives you a picture of a person at the bottom of a road with a dog and trees, and then you say, describe this picture in a creative writing story, and you're like, oh, hold on a minute. Should I be in the mode of an architect or a civil engineer and talk about the structural elements here, or, there's just so many possibilities here, and you get paralyzed with the possibility. And a typical thinker's like, well, no, there's a man with a dog and he's looking a bit sad because it's a bit gloomy, and, he's got away from his family because they're arguing or whatever, and, oh, is that what you're looking for? So sometimes we need explicit instructions on what the pitch is of the activity. Like if you take a football pitch and you've got a goal, soccer pitch for you guys, and you've got a goal and you've got the pitch, a child could be oblivious of the lines on the pitch, and they're just running over here and running over there and showing how good they are at dribbling, and then they kick the ball and they get it in. Look, I managed to hold on to the ball for 15 minutes and run circles around everyone. You're like, Darius, you went out the pitch 5 times and you didn't score a goal. What the hell are you doing? And oh, really? What is that? Oh, you meant to stay in the lines. You meant to get in the goal. Oh, right. Well, why didn't you tell me? I thought it was obvious, but that's just an extreme example. But sometimes we need to be explicitly told what the boundaries of the activity are.
Yeah, this is fascinating because are you thinking the same thing
Yeah.
I'm thinking? So our daughter often uses one of her accommodations, which, other kids get to do it too, but they know she might do it a lot on a test, of having the teacher, talking about the question basically with the teacher. And we've often thought of that as reading the question and sometimes the language being difficult to parse, which perhaps sometimes that's true. But as you're saying this, I wonder actually if most of the time it isn't that.
It's a
She's
scoping.
just like, can
Yeah.
you just tell me what you want here?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
it's a scoping exercise because her brain, and I guess dyslexic
Yes.
brains are. You're thinking of so much. There's so much possibility. You're thinking of everything, right?
Yeah.
And really, a lot of the work in school, I think, for people with dyslexia is to like that's just so right on when you said it's like a scoping. It's like, okay,
It is.
there's
That's the
all
perfect
this,
word.
and all we want you to do is just this little part of it.
Yeah.
And then most people with dyslexia, it's like you said, it's like, oh, okay, that's easy.
Yeah.
Like,
and if you look at dyslexia in adults, and children, one of the biggest challenges they've learned how to read, they've learned how to write, they've learned how to spell reasonably decently, etc., or got tools in place for that, etc. But they're always expanding the scope.
yeah.
You give them a brief, you give them a question, they're always expanding the scope. And you're kind of like, no, hold on a minute, stop. Like, oh, no, I've got to include this and I've got to include that. Do you really? Let's look at the criteria, and we get the question out, and it's like, describe in 3 sentences that picture. Oh, I thought they meant 3 pages. Now I'm being exaggerating, but like sometimes that's how it feels. You just totally expand the scope unnecessarily. And in doing so, you expand the stress, the uncertainty, the confusion, and it's all about expanding the scope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so often people will take off points for something they feel like is outside of the scope of the question, right?
That's
So,
right. Yeah. So, like,
Yeah.
if you look at the grading systems for America and the UK, you look at an English writing exercise, 1/3 of the grade goes towards organization.
Mhm.
Okay. 1/3 of the grade roughly goes to content, and 1/3 of the grade goes to technique. Okay.
Mhm.
So if you're writing an essay, could be really creative content, could be really creative technique, but poorly organized. Okay. Or vice versa. With dyslexia, when you ramble and you go off and expand the scope, they regard that as poor structure. And so you get marked down.
Absolutely.